Libertarianism is one of the most enduring and yet most misunderstood political philosophies in modern history. At its core, libertarianism is the belief that individual liberty is the highest political value. It places personal autonomy, freedom of association, voluntary cooperation, and non-aggression at the center of its worldview. The defining characteristic of libertarian thought is the idea that individuals own themselves, that each person has the moral right to live their life as they choose, so long as they do not infringe upon the equal rights of others. This simple yet powerful idea gives rise to a broad range of political positions, some calling for minimal government and others advocating for the complete abolition of the state, depending on one's view of property, markets, and authority. One of the most unifying ethical concepts in libertarian thought is the non-aggression principle. According to this principle, aggression defined as the initiation of force or fraud is morally illegitimate. This principle is not a call for pacifism, but a recognition that coercion must be limited to self-defense or the defense of others' rights. In this framework, no individual or institution, including the state, has the moral right to impose its will through violence or intimidation. Libertarians extend this principle to a wide array of issues, from taxation to war, from drug laws to surveillance, from business regulations to speech restrictions. They argue that nearly all government functions beyond perhaps the enforcement of contracts and protection of persons and property are rooted in coercion, not consent. Consequently, many libertarians call for dramatically reducing the size and power of the state, or abolishing it altogether. The intellectual foundations of libertarianism run deep. The seeds were planted long before the word libertarian ever existed. We find early libertarian ideas in ancient philosophy, particularly among the Greeks and Chinese. The Taoist philosopher Lao-tzu, writing in the Tao Te Ching over 2,000 years ago, advised rulers to do less, not more. He warned that attempts to control people and shape society through force would only lead to disharmony and suffering. His teachings on non-action, or wu-wei, have been interpreted by modern libertarians as an early articulation of spontaneous order, a central concept in modern libertarian theory. The scholastics of the late Middle Ages, particularly thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and Francisco de Vitoria, developed theories of natural law and individual rights that would later be refined during the Enlightenment. They challenged feudal hierarchy, the divine right of kings, and the legitimacy of slavery, laying a moral foundation for self-ownership and voluntary association. In the 17th century, John Locke formalized many of these ideas into what we now call classical liberalism. Locke argued that rights to life, liberty, and property existed prior to the formation of governments, and that the only legitimate role of a state was to protect those rights. If a government violated them, citizens had the right to alter or abolish it. Locke's ideas were revolutionary, providing a blueprint for the American Declaration of Independence and inspiring political movements around the world. As Enlightenment ideas spread, they took hold in both radical and reformist forms. Figures like Thomas Paine, William Godwin, and the English Levelers pushed liberal thought toward its libertarian edge. Paine's Common Sense and Rights of Man argued against monarchy and in favor of a society where power flowed from the bottom up. Godwin's Political Justice went even further, rejecting all institutionalized coercion and imagining a stateless society governed by reason and mutual respect. By the 19th century, new currents emerged. Individualist anarchists like Lysander Spooner and Benjamin Tucker in the United States, and mutualists like Pierre-Joseph Proudhon in France, developed libertarian theories that blended market exchange with a strong critique of state-backed monopolies and capitalist exploitation. Proudhon famously declared, "Property is theft," referring to property obtained through coercion or unequal privilege, not personal possession or the fruits of labor. Modern libertarianism began to take its current shape in the mid-20th century, especially in the United States. As the welfare state expanded and socialism gained traction in the post-World War II era, a new wave of thinkers rose to defend market capitalism and personal liberty. Economists like Friedrich Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, and Milton Friedman argued that free markets were not only more efficient, but morally superior to centrally planned economies. They believed that planning inevitably led to tyranny, and that only a decentralized order based on private property and voluntary exchange could safeguard freedom. Philosopher Robert Nozick, in his influential book Anarchy, State, and Utopia, presented a moral defense of the minimal state grounded in individual rights. According to Nozick, any redistribution of wealth or forced collective decision-making, even for noble causes, violates the sovereignty of the individual. This school of thought came to dominate what is now often referred to as right-libertarianism. It emphasizes strong property rights, capitalism, and limited government. Yet even within right-libertarianism, divisions persist. Some, like minarchists, support a limited government that only protects rights and enforces contracts. Others, like anarcho-capitalists, believe even these functions can be privatized, making the state unnecessary and illegitimate. On the other side, left libertarians accept the basic framework of individual liberty, but reject the uncritical embrace of capitalism. They argue that current property relations are historically unjust and often perpetuate inequality and domination. Figures like Hillel Steiner, Peter Valentine, and Philippe van Parijs advocate for an egalitarian approach to natural resources. They propose mechanisms like universal basic income or land value taxes to ensure that ownership of the commons does not lead to exploitation. Many left libertarians are inspired by anarchist or socialist traditions and believe the state exists primarily to protect capitalist privilege. They see wage labor as a form of economic coercion and promote alternative models such as cooperatives, mutual credit systems, and decentralized governance. Schools of thought within this camp include geo-libertarianism, mutualism, libertarian municipalism, and syndicalism. Libertarianism today is not a monolith. Variants like neo-libertarianism attempt to reconcile classical liberal principles with modern pluralism. Neo-libertarians accept certain limited forms of government intervention if they result from fair procedures and consent, often drawing from Rawlsian theories of justice. Libertarian paternalism, a term popularized by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein in their book Nudge, takes a pragmatic turn. It argues that people should be free to choose, but that institutions can guide decisions subtly to improve individual well-being. Automatic enrollment in retirement plans is one example. Critics argue that this soft coercion compromises libertarian principles, while supporters say it reflects the complexity of human decision-making in the modern world. There is also libertarian populism, which combines anti-elite sentiment with libertarian economic views. Advocates argue against both government overreach and corporate cronyism. They seek to dismantle what they see as collusion between state power and big business, and call for a return to grassroots economic independence. Libertarianism faces serious critiques from both the left and right. Critics argue that it promotes a form of atomistic individualism that ignores the role of communities, culture, and structural inequality. Others claim that unfettered markets do not necessarily produce fair or efficient outcomes and can lead to exploitation, environmental degradation, and concentrated power. Critics like Corey Robin and Nancy MacLean argue that libertarianism, particularly in its right-wing form, serves elite interests and undermines democratic institutions. They point to the influence of libertarian billionaires, dark money networks, and ideological think tanks as evidence that libertarianism can be used to mask plutocratic control behind a facade of individual freedom. Libertarians respond that freedom must include economic freedom and that voluntary association should not be sacrificed for state-managed equality. They argue that most social problems result not from markets but from state interventions, monopolies, and coercion. They also contend that the ideal society is not one with forced unity, but one where individuals are free to associate or disassociate as they choose. Libertarianism remains one of the most intellectually dynamic and contentious political traditions in the modern world. It is a philosophy that values liberty not as an abstract idea, but as a concrete, lived principle, the right to make choices, pursue happiness, and live free from imposed authority. Whether it takes the form of radical anarchism, market liberalism, or egalitarian mutualism, libertarianism continues to challenge the legitimacy of power, whether that power comes from the state, corporations, or entrenched ideology. In a world grappling with authoritarianism, mass surveillance, corporate consolidation, and social fragmentation, the libertarian question remains vital. What does personal freedom mean to you? And how do we draw the line between our own free will and how that affects others? Thank you for watching.